In late June of 2022, I took a road trip with my cousin Tyler down to South Carolina. We were both in that post-college limbo, unsure of what came next, and decided to spend the summer just drifting through small towns and forgotten places. One of our stops was a rundown beach town called Myrtle Haven, not to be confused with Myrtle Beach. This place was smaller, quieter, and honestly a little eerie. Most of the boardwalk was falling apart, half the shops were closed, but one thing still stood out, an old amusement park on the far end of the pier called Echo Pier Funland. The name sounded charming, but the place had a strange vibe. There were barely any people around. The rides were rusted, the games had faded signs, and the music playing through the speakers sounded warped, like an old tape looping forever. Tyler thought it was cool in a creepy way, so we bought wristbands from a bored-looking teenager at the front booth and wandered in. Most of the rides were things you'd expect, tilt-a-whirls, bumper cars, a haunted house ride, but one attraction caught our attention. It was a wooden roller coaster at the edge of the water called the Ghost Shaker. It didn't look like much, a rickety, weather-beaten track creaking in the sea breeze. No lights, no screams, just a faded sign and a single operator leaning against the control booth. What was odd, though, was the line. There were about 10 people ahead of us, but none of them looked right. Not in a horror movie obvious way, just distant. Blank expressions, no phones, no talking, just standing there, waiting. I remember feeling cold, even though it was nearly 90 degrees out. Tyler nudged me and whispered that something felt off, but before we could change our minds, the gate opened and the operator motioned us forward. The cart looked ancient. All wood and steel bars, no safety lights, just a lap bar that clicked down with a hollow sound. Tyler and I were seated in the back. As the cart rolled forward, the operator, without making eye contact, muttered something. I couldn't hear it fully, but it sounded like, "Don't look back." Then we were off. The ride was faster than it looked. The first drop sent my stomach lurching, but there was no thrill. It felt wrong. The turns were too sharp, the dips too steep, and the wind in my ears carried this awful low groaning sound, like the coaster itself was in pain. I tried to laugh it off, but Tyler didn't say a word. He looked pale. That's when things got worse. We went through a tunnel that wasn't visible from the outside. Total darkness. It felt longer than it should have, and the noise in there was unbearable, like screams underwater, distant but rising. Just as I started to panic, I saw light ahead, but when we burst out, we weren't in the amusement park anymore. We were still on the track, still moving, but the world around us had changed. The ocean was gone. The pier was gone. We were surrounded by endless open marshland, grey skies and black water stretching on all sides. There were structures in the distance, rotted cabins on stilts, half-submerged carnival tents, and something moving in the water. The people in the cart ahead of us hadn't reacted. They were still, eyes wide, lips moving like they were whispering or praying. I shouted Tyler's name, but he didn't respond. His eyes were locked on something to the left. I looked and instantly wished I hadn't. Walking just beyond the track, matching the speed of the cart, was a tall figure in soaking wet clothes. Its head twitched with every step. Its arms dragged behind it, and though it had no face, I knew somehow that it had been waiting for us. The track dipped again and the air grew freezing. My breath came out in thick fog. The screams started again, this time louder, sharper. They weren't from the riders, they were coming from under the track. I glanced down and saw dozens of hands reaching up from the water, pale and slow like seaweed in a current, brushing against the wheels of the coaster. I closed my eyes and begged for it to end. And just like that, we were back. The cart jolted to a stop in front of the station. Same operator, same booth. But the sun was lower in the sky and the park was nearly empty. The people who'd been in line with us were gone. Tyler and I stumbled out, shaking. We didn't speak. We walked straight out of Echo Pier Funland without looking back. That night, Tyler asked if it had been a hallucination, maybe heat stroke, maybe a shared nightmare. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. We checked the next morning, thinking maybe we'd dreamed the whole park, but Echo Pier Funland was still there. Only the Ghost Shaker wasn't. The track was gone. The booth was boarded up. When we asked a local about it, he looked confused and said that ride had been shut down for years. A girl had died on it in 2014. Her cart had flown off during a storm and was never recovered. They dismantled it after that. He even laughed, like the idea of someone riding it was absurd. I still have the wristband. It's cracked and faded, but you can still read the words Echo Pier. Tyler won't talk about what he saw in the tunnel. Neither will I. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear it again, that low groan of wood under pressure, and every once in a while I dream I'm still on the ride. Only this time, when the tunnel ends, we never come back. In July of 2021, I got hired as a summer seasonal ride operator at a regional amusement park in Colorado called Sun Valley Thrill Grounds. It wasn't a huge park, mostly old rides, fried food stands, and a small staff that felt more like a weird family than co-workers. My assignment was the Ferris wheel and occasionally manning the gates of a roller coaster that barely hit 30 miles per hour. Nothing exciting and certainly nothing scary, but the thing about these old parks is that they're stitched together with decades of renovations, duct tape fixes, and a maze of underground service routes that most guests never see. We called them maintenance tunnels. They weren't secret exactly, but they weren't on any map handed to the public. The older employees used them to get around fast or take unofficial breaks away from the supervisors. One of those tunnels ran right beneath the kiddie rides and spilled out behind the old funhouse, which had been closed since before I started. About halfway through July, I started hearing people whisper about Maintenance Tunnel 6. It was the one that connected the staff lockers to a maintenance shed behind the defunct water flume ride. Supposedly, no one used it anymore. Not because it was unsafe, but because something about it made people feel sick. Dizzy, disoriented, like it shifted under their feet. Some of the older guys joked it was haunted. Others just said the air felt wrong, like it was thinner down there. I didn't think much of it until my supervisor, Mike, told me to take a cart of tools down to the shed using Tunnel 6 because the usual golf carts were out of service. He handed me the keys and a flashlight and told me to go the long way, just this once. The tunnel entrance was under the central utility hut, behind a locked steel door I'd never noticed before. When I stepped inside, it smelled like damp metal and moldy carpet, the kind of cold that clings to your clothes. The walls were concrete with old cables running along the ceiling, and my footsteps echoed even when I tried to walk lightly. As I pushed the cart forward, the flashlight flickered. I tapped it, but it stayed weak. I made a note to grab a new battery when I got back. The tunnel curved sharply left then again, and suddenly I had no idea which direction I was facing. That's when the air changed. The further I went, the quieter it got. The sound of the park faded. Then the sound of my own movement dulled, like I'd entered a vacuum. Then something weird happened. I saw light, a small glowing square up ahead. It looked like a service door, cracked open with yellow light spilling out. I knew I should have kept going to the shed, but something about the light made me stop. The cart clanked as I left it behind. I walked slowly toward the door, expecting to see another staff hallway or storage closet. Instead, I saw a room that wasn't on any layout. It was perfectly square, the size of a small break room, but nothing inside made sense. The walls were painted carnival red, but faded and peeling. In the center of the room sat one of those ride photo booths, the kind that snaps your face during a drop and shows you the photo at the exit. But it wasn't plugged in, no wires, no screen, just the camera housing facing an empty wooden chair. Behind it was a wall covered in Polaroids, hundreds of them, all showing different people sitting in that same chair. The expressions weren't right. Most of them looked panicked, mouths wide like mid-scream, eyes blurred from movement. A few looked like they had been taken just as someone turned to run. One photo stopped me cold. A boy, maybe 10 years old, hands clenched into the arms of the chair, his face twisted into pure terror. Behind him, just visible at the edge of the frame, was a tall, blurry figure, pale, with a face that looked smudged out like it had been scratched away from the negative. I turned to leave, but the door I came through wasn't there anymore. I spun, heart pounding, and suddenly the light in the room dimmed. The camera shutter clicked. I froze. The chair was empty. I hadn't sat down. I didn't touch anything, but the camera clicked again. I backed away, nearly tripping over my own feet. The wall buzzed just slightly, and a new photo slid out from the bottom of the booth. It fluttered to the floor. Against every instinct, I picked it up. It was me, standing exactly where I stood now, and behind me, the same blurred figure, closer, figure. I bolted. I didn't look back. I ran down the tunnel, now completely dark, my flashlight dead. I crashed into a wall, turned, found another corner, and just kept running until I saw the door to the shed at the far end. When I burst through it, the sun hit my face like a shock. Everything was loud again, music, people, the roar of roller coasters. Normal. I never told Mike what I saw. I never used that tunnel again. A week later, I quit without giving notice. But here's the thing. A few months ago, out of morbid curiosity, I searched through a forgotten subpage on the park's website, an old archive of promotional materials. There was a gallery called The Smiler Room, buried deep in the directory. I clicked it. It was just one image, a photo of the same booth, the same red room. The caption said it was part of a short-lived interactive horror attraction in the 90s that had been shut down after complaints from parents. But the listed location didn't match any building in the park. It said Tunnel 6, Sub-Level B, a floor that doesn't exist. I never found the photo that camera printed of me. But every time I check the mirror now, I have this paranoid habit of glancing just behind my shoulder, not for movement, for blur, because I know somewhere that thing got just close enough to follow. In October of 2020, I took a weekend job at a small family-run amusement park in rural Pennsylvania called Maple Hollow. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a seasonal park known for its fall festival, hay rides, and a collection of aging attractions like spinning teacups and a miniature train. I was there to help with crowd control near the haunted maze and keep an eye on the kids' rides during peak hours. It was easy work and the staff was friendly enough. But there was one ride that everyone seemed to avoid being assigned to, especially after dark, the Whirly-Bug. The Whirly-Bug was this weird hybrid between a Ferris wheel and a carousel. It had insect-shaped carts that spun as they rotated around a central tower. The whole ride was painted with faded yellows and greens, and the music it played sounded like a music box that had been left out in the rain. When I asked why people didn't like working that station, most just brushed it off, called it boring or too isolated. But one guy, an older maintenance worker named Rudy, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "Don't keep it running past 8:30. It confuses the ride." I thought it was just local superstition. Every small town park has one creepy ride, right? But then came Halloween weekend. The place was packed and the manager started doubling up our shifts to handle the crowd. That night, I got placed on Whirly-Bug duty from 7 to close. I didn't think much of it until I saw the paper schedule, and someone had scratched out closes at 9 p.m. and written in thick marker, "Shut off at 8:30, no exceptions." It was already 7:45, so I figured I'd get maybe 3 more rotations in before shutting it down. The first 2 runs were fine. Parents filming their kids, the ride playing its off-key tune, the cart squeaking around in slow circles, but at 8:20 a woman came by with her son. She looked tired, probably one of the last guests heading out. Her son couldn't have been older than 7. Curly dark hair, striped hoodie, quiet little voice. He pointed to the Whirly-Bug and asked if it was still open. I hesitated for a second. The clock on my phone read 8:24. Just enough time for one last go. I gave a half-hearted nod and let him through while the mum stood at the gate. He climbed into one of the grasshopper-shaped carts near the back. I secured the lap bar and signaled to the booth to start it. As it whirled to life, the lights flickered once, just a brief surge, but enough to make me flinch. I glanced toward the operator booth, but no one else seemed to notice. The ride moved slowly at first, playing its strange melody as the carts bobbed and turned. I watched the boy laugh and wave, his arms in the air. Then the tune began to slow, like someone was dragging a finger along a spinning record. The ride didn't stop. It just began to turn slower, then faster, then slower again. The lights dimmed, not all at once, but section by section, as if something was circling the ride just outside the light's reach. I walked up to the booth, ready to shut it down manually, but when I looked at the control panel, the timer was blank. No numbers, no power readings, just a frozen screen, and then the music cut off entirely. The ride didn't. It kept moving. The carts kept spinning, faster now, jerky and uneven. I hit the emergency stop. Nothing. The Whirly-Bug didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. The boy's cart whipped past me again and again, and something about his posture began to change. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't even moving. His arms were down, head slightly tilted, eyes fixed forward. I ran to the base and started waving for help, but the crowd had mostly thinned out. The mother was gone. Just gone. I didn't see her leave. No one else was nearby. Then I heard the sound, this grinding mechanical wheeze, like something forcing itself to keep spinning long after it was supposed to stop. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes, the ride slowed on its own and creaked to a halt. The lights returned, faint and flickering. I ran to the grasshopper cart, but it was empty. I checked every other cart, all empty. I shouted, ran toward the booths, toward the path behind the ride, thinking maybe he'd slipped out somehow. But the entry gate was still locked. The only way off the ride was through me. I checked under the platform, behind the booth, everywhere, nothing. Security was called. They searched the park, reviewed the entry footage, no trace of the boy. They even checked the guest registry. No matching name, no ticket scan, no photo. But I saw him. I spoke to him. I remember the way his shoes dangled off the edge of the cart. I remember the color of his hoodie, deep navy with white drawstrings. The next morning, the ride was shut down indefinitely. The manager said it was electrical failure, said they'd fix it next season. But I never went back. A few weeks later, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo, an old park promotional shot from the early 2000s. In the background, you could see the Whirly-Bug, freshly painted, looking new. Kids were in the carts, waving, smiling. But in the center cart, just faintly visible, was a boy with curly dark hair and a striped hoodie. Same face, same shoes. The photo had a date printed at the bottom, October 31st, 2002, 18 years to the day. Halloween night. And in tiny print just below the caption were the words, "No ride after 8:30, he stays." If these amusement park horror stories made your heart race, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Because some rides don't end when they